I never thought the woman I helped become a nurse, the one I welcomed into my home like a daughter, would be the one to shatter me. But there I was, lying on the kitchen floor, blood in my mouth, my wrist bent at a sickening angle, and she just stared, like I was a roach under her shoe. My son didn't come. No footsteps, no voice, just a text. Stay away from us. Us. Like I was the outsider in the family I built from scratch. But that night, something inside me changed. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I quietly picked up the broken pieces of myself and plotted something far colder than revenge. Clarity. Because when a woman like me gets pushed too far, we don't explode. We evolve. And I was done being invisible. The tart was still warm when I pulled into Ethan's driveway. Cinnamon apple with a crumb topping, his favorite since he was 12. I had made it with shaking hands that morning, hoping the scent of brown sugar and nutmeg could soften whatever edge still lingered between us. It had been a few tense months. Misunderstandings, clipped phone calls, Sophie's cold stares, but I believed in bridges more than walls. That's what mothers do. We build, even when we're the only ones carrying bricks. The house was quiet when I rang the bell. Sophie opened the door, her eyes scanning the foil-covered dish in my hands like I was delivering poison. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said flatly. "I wanted to," I replied, smiling. "Just a little something for dessert." She stepped aside without a word. The living room looked pristine, like a magazine spread, everything in place except warmth. Ethan wasn't there. "He's upstairs finishing a work call," Sophie said, as if anticipating the question. I walked to the kitchen and began unpacking the tart. The aroma filled the space, cozy and nostalgic. I placed it gently on the counter, noticing the fresh lilies in a vase, white, perfect, lifeless. We sat at the dining table. Sophie plated dinner, grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, rice pilaf. She moved with mechanical grace, her eyes never quite meeting mine. The silence stretched like taut thread. Then it started. "I just hope when we have kids," Sophie began, slicing her chicken with unnecessary force, "we don't repeat certain parenting styles." I looked up slowly. "Excuse me?" "I mean," she continued, eyes locked on her plate, "some people think love means coddling, letting your kid believe the world owes them something." I blinked. "Are we talking about Ethan?" She smiled. Tight, thin, just saying, independence matters. The words stung more than I admitted. I had raised Ethan alone, worked double shifts, skipped meals so he could eat. Independence wasn't given. It was earned with every scar on my hands. "I did my best," I said quietly. "I'm sure you think you did," she replied. Then she stood, gathering plates. "Let me clean up." I followed her into the kitchen. "Sophie, I didn't come here to argue. I came to reconnect." She didn't turn around. "You came here to invade. Again." "What?" "You're always hovering, judging, dropping in with gifts and advice no one asked for. That's not fair. I just crossed boundaries. Again," she snapped. Then she grabbed a glass jug of water from the fridge. I stepped forward, gently placing a hand on her arm. "I think we're both saying things we don't mean." That was when it happened. In one swift motion, Sophie turned and shoved the jug at me, her hands like stone. The corner of it slammed into my ribs as I staggered back. My foot caught the edge of the rug and my body twisted. My wrist hit the kitchen island with a sickening crack. I hit the floor, breath punched out of me, head spinning. She stood over me. No apology, no gasp, just icy silence. "You're not welcome here anymore," she said coldly. Then she walked away, heels clicking softly against tile. No Ethan, no voice from upstairs. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the throb in my arm building like a tidal wave. I lay there for what felt like minutes, staring at the ceiling. My wrist had already begun to swell. I could barely move my fingers. Blood trickled from my lip where I'd bitten it on the way down. Still, no footsteps. With great effort, I rolled onto my knees, used the chair for balance, and stood. My body trembled, but not just from pain. Betrayal ran deeper than bone. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve, picked up my purse, and walked out the door, leaving the tart untouched on the table. Outside, the sky was too blue, the sun too cheerful. I sat in my car and let the silence hold me for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. A text. "Please don't come back. It's better this way. Stay away from us. Us." Like I was a problem, a disease, not his mother, not the woman who taught him how to tie a tie, who sat beside him during fevers, who cheered when he got his first job. Just a nuisance. I didn't cry. I drove to urgent care. Fractured wrist. Temporary cast. The nurse asked if I wanted to file a report. I said, not today. But something inside me had already begun to shift. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the blood had already soaked through the cuff of my blouse. It was sticky, warm against the cast they'd wrapped hastily at urgent care. My arm ached in rhythmic pulses, like it was trying to remind me what had just happened, as if I could forget. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, engine ticking quietly, watching the shadows from the oak trees stretch across the porch. Everything was still. No sirens, no phone call from Ethan, not even a follow-up text. No one had asked if I needed help, not at the house. Not even Sophie, who had stood over me like a sentry after knocking me to the ground. No offer of ice, no apology. Just that cold, cutting voice and her back turned as she walked away. I finally made it inside and collapsed into the living room chair. I didn't turn on the lights. The sun was beginning to set, casting the room in a honey gold hue that felt both too beautiful and too cruel. I reached for my phone. Still just that one message from Ethan. "Please don't come back. It's better this way. Stay away from us." I reread it, as if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something softer, something less final. But they didn't. They just stared back at me like a verdict. Us. As if I'd never been part of the equation to begin with. I didn't cry. Instead, I moved slowly to my desk in the study, fingers stiff, cast heavy. I opened the folder labeled Ethan and Sophie Mortgage Docs. I had printed everything. Out of habit, I guess. Years of raising a child alone teaches you to keep records, especially when your name is on the line. They had asked me to co-sign 6 weeks ago, just until the bank clears our joint income, Ethan had said. Sophie, eyes wide, had played the part of the glowing partner. "It's our dream home, Margaret. We just need a little boost." I said yes. Of course I did. That was before Sophie started snapping at me during Sunday brunches, before Ethan stopped answering my calls. I powered on my laptop, logged into the mortgage application portal. The status was still pending. The final approval hadn't been issued yet. A small mercy. I hovered the mouse over the button. Withdraw cosigner authorization. Click. Confirm. Done. There was no satisfaction, no anger, just clarity. They would get the call in the morning, the loan would fall through, the house they fawned over would slip through their fingers, and I wouldn't be there to watch it happen. I closed the browser. Then something nudged at the back of my mind, a strange itch, a question. Why was my name listed twice in the secondary asset declaration? I reopened the file, dug deeper, line by line, and then I saw it. A field had been pre-filled with the name of my retirement account, not just listed, linked. It had been marked as a fallback asset in the case of payment default, a field I had never authorized, never discussed, never signed for. I blinked, scrolled again. There was a changed timestamp dated back 3 months ago. The document had been updated, remotely. My password was private, my laptop secured, except one night, one stupid night, I had let Sophie use my computer when her phone died during a dinner visit. She had smiled sweetly, thanked me, and stayed up answering emails while I loaded the dishwasher. I had thought nothing of it, until now. My hands went cold, sweat blooming along my spine despite the cast weighing me down. Sophie hadn't just manipulated Ethan. She hadn't just lied about respect or boundaries. She had accessed my personal financials. She had altered documents. She had planted a back door to my life savings, my retirement, my safety net. Gone, if I hadn't caught this in time. A new wave of nausea surged through me, not from the pain in my wrist, but from the realization that I'd almost handed my entire future to a woman who saw me as disposable. My phone buzzed again. Not Ethan. An automated notification. Your profile settings have been changed. I clicked the alert. It was from the financial portal linked to my retirement account. Another attempt had been made just 5 minutes ago to verify ownership using my backup email. The one only 2 people knew, me and Ethan. But Ethan never asked for it. Sophie had 2 years ago. For a holiday card list, she'd said. I stared at the screen. Then I picked up the phone. Not to scream, not to confront, but to call my lawyer. 3 days passed. No word, no apology, just silence, thick and deliberate. Then a knock at my door. I opened it to find Ethan and Sophie standing on the porch, both holding tightly to a manila folder, like it was a passport to redemption. Ethan looked nervous, eyes bloodshot, hands twitching slightly. Sophie stood straighter than usual, a smug tightness in her jaw that told me this was no act of humility. It was strategy. "Mom," Ethan said quietly, "can we come in?" I stepped aside without speaking. They sat on the couch, Sophie crossing her legs like she was preparing for an interview. I remained standing, arms folded, wrists still wrapped in plaster. Ethan cleared his throat. "We're here to talk, to fix things." "You mean to get what you need," I corrected. He winced. Sophie didn't flinch. "We know what happened was unfortunate," Sophie began, her voice syrupy and sharp all at once. "Things got heated. We're all under pressure, and I think misunderstandings—" "You assaulted me," I said, flat and cold. She blinked. "I didn't mean to. You startled me. It was an accident." "Well, you said you're not welcome here anymore while I bled on your floor. That doesn't sound accidental." Sophie glanced at Ethan, who stayed quiet. "I'm pregnant," she said finally. "I didn't want to say anything, not yet, but it's true. We're expecting. And the bank denied our mortgage after you revoked the co-signature. We're just asking you to help us, for the baby's sake." She opened the folder and slid it across the coffee table. Fresh paperwork, new signatures, new dates, same trap. I looked at the pages, then back at her. "You want me to sign this without even acknowledging what happened?" Ethan jumped in. "We're acknowledging it, Mom. That's why we're here. To apologize." "Then say it," I said, my voice steady. "Say it plainly. Right here, right now." Sophie's lips curled ever so slightly. "Fine. I'm sorry. Okay? I didn't mean to hurt you. Can we move on now?" It was the kind of apology scraped off a sidewalk. No soul, no weight, just syllables assembled under duress. I stared at her, then turned to Ethan. "Is that enough for you?" He rubbed his temples, exhausted. "Mom, please, we're trying. I just need this to work." "Do you?" I asked. "Do you need it to work for your child, or do you need it to work because Sophie told you this was the only path left?" He didn't answer. I picked up the folder, opened it slowly, pen in hand. Sophie leaned forward. Then I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and without another word, I dropped the folder into the flames. Ethan lunged forward. "Mom!" Sophie screamed. "Are you insane?" The papers curled instantly, edges blackening, ink bleeding into smoke. I watched it burn, my signature, my security, their entitlement, all turn to ash. "I'm not insane," I said calmly. "I'm awake." Sophie shot to her feet. "You just ruined our chance at a home." "No," I replied. "I ruined your plan to manipulate me." Ethan looked devastated. "We needed that house, Mom." "Nay, I needed a son who wouldn't watch me bleed on a kitchen floor," I said sharply. "We don't always get what we need." Silence bloomed, thick and heavy. Then Ethan whispered, "She's pregnant." I turned to Sophie. "Prove it." Her mouth opened slightly, then shut. "I don't have to." "You do if you want my trust." Ethan stood, folding the now empty folder under his arm. "We'll go." Sophie hesitated, glaring. "You'll regret this." "No," I replied. "I regret nothing more than raising a man who won't defend his own mother." That hit him. He looked down at the ashes in the fireplace, then back at me. "I'll call you tomorrow." I didn't respond. They left in silence. As the door clicked shut behind them, I stood still, letting the quiet wrap around me. My wrist throbbed, my heart more so. But deep down, beneath the pain, something began to settle. I had drawn a line, and for once, I was the one holding the pen. The next morning, I was watering my front porch lilies when Mrs. Danvers, my neighbor from across the street, waved as she strolled past with her dachshund. She slowed at the edge of my lawn. "I heard Ethan and Sophie stopped by yesterday," she said, voice cautious. I nodded. "You could say that." She leaned in slightly, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but I used to work at Westline Credit Union. Mortgage approvals. Sophie's name came through once. She applied with another man, not Ethan. Different address, different story, and it got flagged for discrepancies." I narrowed my eyes. What kind of discrepancies? Falsified employment history, altered tax forms. We rejected it, and the file was marked for follow-up due to suspicious activity. Never saw her again. My breath caught. When was this? About a year before she married Ethan. I thanked her quietly. She nodded, lips pressed thin, then continued her walk like nothing had happened. Inside, I sat down slowly, heart hammering. Sophie had a history of manipulating financial systems, of building illusions on paper to trap people in her reality. And now, she had Ethan. I was still processing that when my phone buzzed. Claire. I hadn't spoken to her in months. The younger, quieter sister who had always seemed a bit out of place beside Sophie's sharp edges. She was the only one in that family who ever helped clean the kitchen after dinner, who spoke with softness in her voice. "Hi, Mrs. Collins. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need to tell you something. It's about Sophie, and it's serious." I replied immediately, "I'm listening." Seconds later, another message arrived. "She's not pregnant. She lied to Ethan. I just found out. I have proof." My fingers trembled as I typed back, "What kind of proof?" Claire responded with a screenshot. It was a text thread between the two sisters. In it, Sophie had written, "If I say I'm pregnant, he'll beg Mom to sign again. We'll get the loan, the house, everything. Then maybe I'll actually think about getting pregnant." There was no ambiguity. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't suspicion. It was intent, cold, calculated as clinical. I stared at the screen, my pulse loud in my ears. My body went rigid, every muscle locked like a gate against a coming flood. Claire sent one more message. "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry, but I couldn't watch her manipulate Ethan anymore. You deserve to know." For a moment, I said nothing. Then I replied simply, "Thank you. I believe you." I sat there in silence for several minutes. No music, no bird song, just the tick of the clock on the mantelpiece and the weight of clarity pressing down like gravity. I stood up, walked into my study, picked up the phone, dialed my lawyer. "Ms. Rayner, bam," I said. "We need to freeze the trust account, the one for Ethan, the one set to release when his first child is born." She paused. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," I said, my voice like steel. "Something's very wrong." I gave her the details, forwarded the screenshot, and authorized a temporary hold on the release clause. The trust would now be reviewed under potential fraud suspicion. Ethan wouldn't see a cent, not unless he could prove the pregnancy was real. And after that message, I knew he couldn't. But this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, about reclaiming the narrative, about telling the world and myself that I would no longer be the woman others used for stepping stones. I printed out every document, the fraudulent mortgage entry, the trust fund clause, the text messages. I placed them in a red folder and slid it into my safe. Then I sat back down, the house still silent, and made a second list. Things Sophie had access to, passwords I needed to change, accounts I needed to lock. The deeper I went, the more furious I became. Not with Sophie, but with myself. How many signs had I ignored? How many small betrayals had I swept under rugs woven from optimism? I had mistaken manipulation for misunderstanding. I had mistaken Ethan's silence for stress. But I knew better now. This wasn't miscommunication. This was war, and I would fight it in the way only a woman like me knows how, with silence, with documents, with the weight of truth. One layer at a time. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, with a fading red awning and the faint smell of cinnamon steeped into its walls. I chose a table by the window, clutching my tea like it could warm more than my fingers. Claire arrived 10 minutes late, cheeks pink from the wind, anxiety written in every step. "Hi, Mrs. Collins," she said softly, slipping into the seat across from me. "Margaret," I corrected gently. "Please." She nodded, still hesitant, like the name carried too much weight. We sat in silence for a moment before I asked, "How long have you known?" Claire looked down at her latte. "About 2 weeks." She told me the lie in passing. Said it like it was no big deal, like faking a pregnancy was just a tool in her kit. My stomach turned. "She's done this before?" Claire gave a sad, small smile. "Worse. Back in college, she faked a tumor. Told her boyfriend she needed surgery, collected thousands from friends and even a GoFundMe page. He found out when the hospital said they had no record of her. She disappeared on him the next day, moved in with our aunt in Seattle, changed her number." The words hit me like cold water down my spine. "And no one stopped her?" I asked. "She always landed on her feet," Claire said. "New place, new story. Our parents enabled it. They said she was just dramatic or too emotional. But I saw the patterns, the lies, the way she manipulates people into giving and giving until they're empty." I thought of Ethan. My Ethan. Once full of laughter and stubborn dreams. Now a man fraying at the edges, sleep-deprived and hollowed out. "She's isolating him, I murmured. Claire nodded. "She does that. Turns people against their families, makes them believe they're the only ones who understand." My throat tightened. I had seen the signs, missed calls, evasive conversations, holidays skipped last minute. I told myself he was just busy, that marriage was hard, that Sophie was stressed. But now it was clear. She wasn't just dishonest, she was dangerous. "She said he's useless now," I said quietly, recalling the venom in her voice during their last visit, like he was only valuable as long as I could give her something. Claire's expression shifted. Pity, sorrow, and rage in equal measure. "That sounds like her." I stared into my tea, the steam fogging my glasses slightly. I raised him to be kind, independent, to think for himself. But somehow, he's not the boy I knew anymore. "He's still in there," Claire said softly, "but she's buried him deep." I blinked, the tears threatening again. I hadn't cried since the night Sophie pushed me. But this grief felt different. It wasn't just pain, it was the realization that I had lost something more than a wrist or a house or even respect. I had lost the version of my son who knew me. Claire reached across the table, placed her hand gently over mine. "If it comes to it," she said, "I'll testify. About the fake pregnancy, about the past, all of it." I nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the gravity of that offer. "Thank you." We finished our drinks in silence. Before she left, Claire handed me a thumb drive. Photos, messages, voice memos, just in case. I held it like it was a lifeline. When she walked away, I sat in that cafe for another 30 minutes, staring out at the people passing by, families, couples, laughter echoing off the glass. I wondered if any of them had ever handed over their heart, their home, their trust, only to watch it be devoured by someone they once welcomed with open arms. That night, I pulled out a box from the back of my closet, old journals, school drawings, baby shoes. I found a photo of Ethan at age 10, front teeth missing, holding a spelling bee trophy in one hand and my hand in the other. He looked so proud, so safe. And now, he was drowning in something he didn't even recognize as water. I sat on the floor for hours, memories spilling faster than I could stop them. This wasn't just about Sophie anymore. This was about rescuing my son from the slow erosion of himself. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when I returned from the grocery store. I had spent an hour walking the aisles in silence, selecting apples, soup cans, and a small bar of dark chocolate I knew Ethan used to love. Some part of me still believed that one day he might come back for coffee and honesty. I unlocked the front door, balancing the bags on my hip. Something felt off. There was no sound, no smell of anything new, no visual chaos, but still, the air felt different, shifted. I moved slowly through the hallway, eyes scanning the living room, then the study. Everything appeared untouched until I reached my bedroom. The top drawer of my dresser was open. My breath hitched. I never leave it open. Heart pounding, I stepped closer. The red velvet box tucked beneath layers of scarves behind a photo of my wedding day was missing. Gone. That box held the last physical memory I had of my husband, our anniversary ring. White gold, delicate sapphire center, flanked by dew-like diamonds. He'd given it to me 20 years ago, one evening after dinner, hands shaking slightly as he said, "Because no stone on earth could match your strength." It wasn't just a ring, it was the only piece of him I had left. I dropped the grocery bags. Eggs cracked on the floor. Milk pooled into the rug. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I picked up. "Mom?" His voice was panicked. "Is Sophie with you?" "No," I replied, breath shaky. "She's gone. I came home from work and she wasn't here. Her stuff's mostly here, but the safe's open and your ring, the one from Dad, it was in a little box on our dresser. It's gone." My stomach turned. "She took it?" I asked, voice trembling. "I think so. There was a note, just said, 'Don't wait up.' She's not answering texts. Her phone's off." He sounded like a boy again, confused, frightened, hollow. But I couldn't comfort him, not this time. "She was in my house," I said. "She took the real ring from my drawer." There was silence on the other end. "I didn't know," he whispered. "She's been stealing more than jewelry, Ethan." He didn't respond. I hung up before I could cry. Then I walked to my study, pulled open the drawer with my legal folder, and called Ms. Rayner. "We need to proceed," I said. "Full theft report. I want the police involved." She didn't hesitate. "I'll file it today." While the report processed, I sat alone in the living room, the scent of cracked eggs drifting from the kitchen, the velvet void in my chest wider than ever. This wasn't just about a ring. This was about erasure. Sophie hadn't just taken an object. She had ripped away the one thing I still clung to, the tether to my past, to the man who once made me feel like I mattered. And Ethan? He had let her in. Even if he hadn't known, even if he hadn't meant to, he had made it possible. He had left the door open, handed her the key, looked away while she dismantled me. I thought back to that night I sat beside his hospital bed after he broke his arm in high school, telling him stories until he smiled through the pain. To the mornings I skipped breakfast so he could eat before school. To the time I stayed up 3 nights straight editing his college essay, making sure every word was perfect because I wanted the world to see what I saw. How had we gotten here? How had he let this happen? My chest ached, not from grief, but from realization. The Ethan I had raised was gone, or buried so deep he might never come back. I stood and began collecting the scattered groceries, cleaning the mess as methodically as I once packed his lunch. Milk, bread, silence. The truth had cut deeper than I thought possible. Sophie had stolen the ring, but Ethan had let her into the vault, and for that, I didn't know who I mourned more, the man I buried 10 years ago, or the son I had just lost to a woman who wore lies like perfume. The pawn shop reeked of metal and desperation. Jewelry cases lined the walls, their glass smudged by years of bargain pleas. The man behind the counter had a thick mustache and a wary stare. I showed him the photo. Ethan at 10, holding a bouquet in one hand, the sapphire ring glinting faintly on my finger. "She came in 2 days ago," he said, nodding. "Said it was from her grandmother, wanted to trade for cash and a plane ticket." My breath caught. "Where to?" "She didn't say," he replied. "But she asked if we could do it off the record. I told her no. We keep things clean here. She left without making the deal. Said she'd come back." I handed him my number. "If she does, call me immediately." He nodded once. It took less than 48 hours. The call came on a Sunday afternoon. "She's here," the man whispered. "She's arguing with my clerk right now. wants the ring back. I didn't bother changing clothes. I grabbed my coat, keys, and sped the entire way. When I entered the shop, she was standing near the counter, sunglasses pulled low, hoodie up. But I knew her stance. Defensive, chin high, arms stiff. She turned. For a brief moment, her lips parted in mock surprise. "Mrs. Collins." "Don't," I snapped. She sighed. "Fine. Here." She pulled a small box from her bag and shoved it toward me. "Take it. It's cursed anyway." I opened the box. The ring sat inside, glittering under the fluorescent lights. Too shiny, too light, too perfect. I lifted it slowly, held it to the light, then froze. The sapphire was wrong, its hue too pale, the diamond edges too symmetrical. The band was pristine, no scratch along the edge where my husband had accidentally grazed it against the stone countertop years ago. It was a replica, a damn good one, but fake. I looked up. "Where's the original?" She smiled wide now, a predator unmasked. "You really think I'm that stupid? I made a copy months ago, just in case." My throat went dry. "What did you do with the real one?" She shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe I sold it. Maybe I buried it. Maybe it's in a river. You'll never know." "You stole from me." "Not yet." "You gave it to me," she sneered, "when you let me into your life." The clerk behind her shifted uncomfortably. I could feel his eyes on us, on the tension thick enough to slice. "I've reported the theft," I said calmly. "Police are involved. There's a case file open." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Margaret, you really think that ring is traceable now? I had it altered. No engraving, no serials. It's just a pretty little lie now, like your perfect family." I stepped closer, voice low. "You may have won this move, but you're not the only one who knows how to play long." Sophie's smile faltered for a split second, barely a twitch, but I saw it. I walked out, the fake ring clutched in my palm like a dead bird. When I returned home, there was an envelope shoved under my front door. No name, no address, just a single line typed in bold. "Next time, it won't just be a ring." I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Then I lit a fire in the hearth and tossed the paper in. Watched it curl, blacken, disintegrate. Sophie thought this was a game. She thought threats would keep me afraid. But she was wrong, because I wasn't playing anymore. I was dismantling the board, piece by piece. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but strategy. While the fake ring sat uselessly in a drawer, I sat at my desk with my reading glasses and a legal pad. The fireplace crackled beside me, casting long shadows on the walls. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was preparing a final move. I called Ms. Rayner the next morning. "I want to revise the trust," I said. "For Ethan?" she asked, already pulling up files. "Yes, but with conditions." I inhaled, steadying my voice. "He only receives his inheritance if he files for divorce and meets me in person to acknowledge the truth." There was a pause, then a quiet, professional, "Understood." "And if he doesn't?" I asked, already knowing the answer I wanted. "The trust defaults to your alternate beneficiary. At the moment, you haven't listed one." I slid a paper across the table. It had Claire's name printed neatly at the top. She spoke up when no one else would. She deserves something real. Ms. Rayner nodded slowly, typing notes. "This is bold, Margaret. She threatened to destroy what's left of my family. I'm simply giving my son a choice, truth or loyalty to a lie." The paperwork was finalized that afternoon. Later that evening, I took a photo of the first page, just enough to show the clause titles and signatures, and sent it to Ethan with no message, no threats, no guilt, just the decision. He'd know what it meant. I didn't need to explain. For once, silence would serve me. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered out of instinct. "Is this Margaret Collins?" the man asked. His tone was clipped, professional but laced with urgency. "Yes. Who is this?" "I'm calling from Vantage Financial Security. I work in internal auditing. This might be strange, but do you know someone named Sophie Albright?" My heart dropped. "Yes," I said slowly. "She's involved with my son." She used to be employed here, he continued. We don't typically make personal calls, but I felt I had to say something off the record. Go on? She's under internal investigation for misusing company assets and accessing client portfolios without authorization, but that's not all. I held my breath. She's been involved with a man named Brent Kingsley, senior partner at an affiliated firm. We believe she convinced him to open a private account for her under false pretenses. There's talk she may have implied a pregnancy. My blood ran cold. Pregnancy? I repeated. Yes, Brent mentioned he was planning a future with her, said she'd promised to leave her current partner. But when we traced the movement of funds, she was siphoning money, I finished for him. Exactly, quietly, into an account registered in her maiden name. I gripped the edge of the desk. Does Brent know? He suspects something. That's why I'm calling. He asked questions, then backed off. We think he's afraid it might go public. I thanked him, hung up, then sat very still. Another man, another lie, another bank account. Sophie wasn't just manipulative. She was methodical. She had turned deception into an art form. And Ethan? He was just her latest gallery. For a brief moment, I imagined what might happen if Brent learned everything, if he spoke to Ethan, if their timelines crossed. But I knew Sophie. She would twist it, make it sound like desperation, like love, like sacrifice. But this time, I had facts. I opened my folder and added the details, the timeline, Brent's name, the new account. It was all coming together now. I wasn't afraid of Sophie anymore. She had turned my family into a battlefield, but I had built the damn foundation, and I wasn't stepping aside. It was nearly dusk when I heard the knock. Not hurried, not angry, just hesitant. I opened the door, and there stood Ethan, his face gaunt, eyes ringed with exhaustion, his shoulders slumped like a boy dragging the weight of too many bad decisions. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice barely audible. I nodded once and stepped aside. He walked in slowly, as if afraid the floor might collapse beneath him. I could smell stress on him. Coffee, sweat, shame. He didn't sit, just stood in the center of the living room, hands clenched. "I got your message," he began. "The trust. The clause." I didn't speak. I let silence stretch, let him fill it. I thought it was harsh, at first. Then I realized it was generous. It gave me a choice, something I haven't had in a while. He pulled something from his coat pocket. My heart stopped. It was the ring, the real one. He placed it gently on the coffee table. "She mailed it back yesterday," he said. "No note, just a box. Then, this morning, a letter came. Handwritten. One line." He handed it to me. The paper was cheap, folded twice. I opened it. "Give your mom back her toy. I'm done with this game." My chest tightened, not from pain, but clarity. This wasn't remorse. This was her final spit in our faces. "She called it a toy," I whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. "That's who she really is." He sank into the couch, burying his face in his hands. I waited. Finally, he looked up, eyes glassy, voice ragged. "Mom, I have to tell you something, and it's ugly." I sat across from him. He inhaled, then exhaled in a shudder. "I found the pregnancy test weeks ago, in the trash, unused, still sealed. She said she took another one. I wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. Why? Because if she was lying, then I'd turn my back on you for nothing. Then I wasn't just a fool, I was cruel." He pressed his palms into his eyes. I didn't want that to be true. I couldn't face what I'd already done. My voice was soft. "So you played along?" I did. I told myself I was protecting a future, that we were building something. But deep down, I knew it was built on rot. And still you stayed. I thought leaving would prove I was weak, that forgiving you meant I was wrong. I leaned forward. "Ethan, strength isn't clinging to a lie. It's walking away from it." He nodded, but the shame in his face ran deep. "She manipulated me," he whispered, "little by little. Made me doubt every instinct, every memory. She told me you were controlling, that you never saw me as a man, just your project. And I believed her. That's what abusers do, I said gently. They isolate. They distort. They make you choose between loyalty and truth. He rubbed his hands together. I kept thinking, if I just proved myself, if I just loved her harder, then she'd soften. Then she'd stop lying. And she didn't. She got worse. Controlling, distant, cold. I wasn't even allowed to talk to Claire. She said family was poison. I exhaled. She knew Claire saw through her. She sees through me too now, he said bitterly. They all do. No, I said firmly. Claire sees someone crawling out of the fog, someone brave enough to admit they've been wrong. He swallowed hard. Do you? I studied his face. My son. My boy. The one who made macaroni necklaces. The one who held my hand at his father's funeral. The one who disappeared into a woman's web and now sat before me, unraveling. I see someone I still love, I said. His chin trembled. I'm sorry, he whispered. You should be. I want to fix this. I want to be me again. Then start, I said. File for divorce. Go to therapy. Tell the truth. He looked down. I will, he said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. We sat for a long while after Ethan's confession, letting the quiet between us breathe. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't angry. It was the silence of two people sifting through the wreckage, gathering whatever pieces of love still had shape. Then I stood and retrieved a folder from the side table, the trust revision papers. I handed it to him. He took it like it might burn his hands. This is the condition, I said, voice clear. You file for divorce, you attend therapy, and you acknowledge what's happened out loud. Ethan opened the folder, eyes scanning the clauses. I saw the moment his eyes found Claire's name listed as the alternate beneficiary. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. You trust her more than me now, he said softly. I trust her to tell the truth, I replied. Even when it's ugly, even when it costs her something. He nodded slowly, the weight of it all settling in. I'll do it, he said at last. I'll file. I'll go to therapy. Good, I said. Then I paused. There's one more condition. He looked up. You stand in front of this family, I said, at the next gathering, and you tell them what happened. You don't sugarcoat it. You don't hide behind excuses. You tell them who you chose, what it cost, and why you were wrong. His eyes widened. Mom, I stood in silence while I was pushed, betrayed, stolen from. I don't want revenge, Ethan, but I want truth in full daylight. He rubbed his face, then let out a shaky breath. Okay. No backouts. No, he said. No more hiding. I nodded once, then leaned back, but Ethan didn't move. His hands stayed on the folder. His fingers traced the edge like it held a story he hadn't told yet. I have to tell you something else, he said. I waited. When we got engaged, he began, Sophie insisted on a prenup. I thought it was strange. She didn't have much money, but she said it was to protect me from you. My eyebrows lifted. She convinced me you were planning to meddle in our finances, that you didn't trust her, that you'd try to control everything. So she had this lawyer draft a prenup with a clause. He hesitated. What clause? That any asset you left me, your savings, retirement, even this house, would be held in a joint marital account, that she'd have access if we ever separated. My throat went dry. And you signed it? He looked ashamed. I didn't read the details. She pressured me. We were weeks from the wedding. She said I was being disloyal if I didn't sign. I wanted to prove I wasn't your puppet. I closed my eyes. That was it. The final piece. This wasn't just deception. It was architecture. Sophie had been building a web from the beginning, spinning contracts, lies, fake pregnancies, isolating him from his family, setting legal traps in case he ever broke free. This wasn't about love. It never had been. It was about control, and Ethan, my son, had been her pawn. "I didn't know how deep it went," he said. "Not until you pulled the mortgage. Then things started unraveling." I opened my eyes and looked at him, not with judgment but understanding. "This wasn't your fault," I said softly. "You were groomed, manipulated, and you're not the first." His lips trembled. "Why didn't I see it?" "Because you wanted to believe in her more than you believed in your own doubts." He looked down. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You're seeing clearly now. That's what matters." He nodded. In that moment, I saw the boy I had raised, the boy who used to climb trees and tell me he was going to change the world. Maybe he still could, but first he had to reclaim himself. Easter arrived with soft sunshine and the scent of freshly cut grass. The garden bloomed in full color, lavender, tulips, and daffodils lining the stone walkway like an unspoken promise that healing was possible. I had spent the morning setting the table on the patio, preparing deviled eggs and slicing ham, pretending like this was any other year. But it wasn't. This year, everything felt different. Not lighter exactly, just honest. When the guests arrived, it was quiet at first. People greeted me with warm smiles, careful glances, hesitant questions. Word had traveled, as it always did in families. They knew something had happened, even if they didn't know the whole story. Ethan came last. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, and held a small paper bag in one hand. His steps were slower, more deliberate. When he reached the patio, he looked around at the relatives, his aunts, cousins, childhood neighbor friends, and then at me. I gave him a single nod. He cleared his throat. "Before we eat," he said, voice projecting just enough, "I'd like to say something." The chatter died instantly. He looked down, then up again, eyes meeting mine. "I failed my mother," he began. "I let someone into our lives who hurt her, not just physically, but emotionally. I believed lies that were easier than facing the truth. And in doing that, I betrayed the person who raised me, protected me, and never stopped loving me." He paused. Silence held the space. "I won't make excuses. I won't blame stress or confusion. I made choices. And I need everyone here to know I was wrong." His voice cracked slightly. "But I'm trying to be better now. I'm in therapy. I filed for divorce. I'm rebuilding, not just my life, but my values." He turned to me fully. "And most of all, I'm grateful for a mother who didn't give up, even when I made it almost impossible to love me." There were tears in a few eyes now. Even the hard-headed uncle from Georgia looked like he swallowed a lump in his throat. I walked up to him slowly, wrapped my arms around him, and whispered, "I never stopped." The guests clapped softly, a few murmurs of "good for you," and that took guts. Ethan sat down, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for a decade. Lunch was lively, warm. No one brought up Sophie. No one asked about court dates or settlements. They talked about gardening, travel plans, and who made the best potato salad. And for once, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own family. Later that afternoon, while I was trimming rosemary in the garden, I saw her. Claire. She stood just beyond the trellis holding a small basket of lemon scones. We locked eyes. For a second, the noise of the party dulled to silence. Then I stepped forward. She did too, and we embraced, not like strangers who shared a war, but like soldiers who survived it. "I'm so glad he's okay," Claire said softly. "So am I." She smiled. "You look lighter." "I feel it." We sat together on the bench near the rose bushes. The wind carried laughter from the patio, birds chirping overhead like background music. "Do you ever wish you'd handled it differently?" Claire asked. I shook my head. "No. Sometimes the only way people learn is when they lose everything they tried to take." She nodded thoughtfully. Then Ethan appeared at the edge of the garden path, holding something behind his back. "Hey," he said. "Got something for you." I raised an eyebrow. He pulled out a bouquet of tulips, soft pink, just like the ones he used to pick for me every spring as a boy, and a folded piece of paper. I took it slowly, opened it. "Mom," it read, "thank you for being the kind of mother who didn't just teach me how to walk, but how to stand again when I fell flat on my face. I've learned more in these last few months than I did in a decade, and every lesson pointed back to you. You were always right. And I'm ready to become the man you raised. Finally. Fully. Love, Ethan." I blinked away tears. He smiled a little sheepishly. And for the first time in years, I felt something return. Not just peace, but pride. My son was home. The Easter sun was sinking low, casting golden light across the garden, gilding each leaf like a benediction. Guests were lingering, chatting in soft voices, reluctant to let the calm end. It felt like a peace we'd all fought hard for. Claire and I sat beneath the old maple, our knees brushing, the air thick with lavender and redemption. She leaned in slightly and said, "There's something I haven't told you." I looked at her. "Go on." She hesitated, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "Sophie's in deeper trouble than you know. There's a multi-state investigation now. Fraud, wire transfers, identity theft. Turns out Brent wasn't the only one she targeted." I blinked. "You're serious?" "She used aliases, rented P.O. boxes. There's a paper trail spanning 4 states. A joint task force is reviewing it." I was stunned, but not surprised. Sophie had always been playing a longer, darker game than we realized. "They may reach out to you," Claire continued. "You could be a key witness. You've got motive, proof, timeline. You're in a position to make sure she never does this to another family again." I sat quietly, staring at the place where Ethan had just stood with his letter, where my son had finally come home. Then I shook my head. "No," I said softly. Claire blinked. "No, I've already won," I said. "She's gone, exposed, alone. But justice, Sophie feeds on conflict, on being seen, even if it's in a courtroom. I won't give her a spotlight. She wanted a war. I gave her silence. That's louder than any testimony." Claire smiled slowly. "That's poetic and terrifying." I laughed. "Then it's perfect." We stood and returned to the house together. Most guests had gone, but the kitchen was warm with leftover smells and lingering kindness. I excused myself and walked down the hallway into my bedroom. The velvet ring box sat on my nightstand. I picked it up gently, thumb brushing the edge. Then I opened my closet, pulled out the fireproof lockbox, and placed the box inside. The click of the lock echoed in the quiet room. It wasn't just a ring anymore. It was the memory of everything I'd lost and everything I'd taken back. As I turned to leave, I glanced at the mirror. For the first time in years, I saw a woman not defined by her pain or her grief or the love she gave away too easily. I saw someone whole. That evening, Ethan stayed late, helping wash dishes with Claire while they debated over which dessert had been the crowd favorite. I listened from the hallway, leaning against the wall, letting their voices fill the space that had once felt hollow. It was a new kind of family now, not bound by titles or traditions, but by choice, by truth. When Ethan kissed my cheek goodnight, he whispered, "Thanks for waiting for me." I never stopped. After they left, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, staring into the fireplace, though no flames burned there. I thought of the beginning, of Sophie's voice laced with poison, of Ethan's silence, of the blood on my sleeve and the fracture in my wrist. I remembered the cold message, "Stay away from us," as if I had never belonged, as if I hadn't built that us from scratch. Thread by thread, bedtime story by bedtime story, paycheck by paycheck. But that version of them was gone now. And I had never been clearer. The ring was locked away. The wounds were scarred over. The silence that once felt suffocating now felt sacred. And the final words I whispered into the dark, for no one to hear but myself, were these: